Thursday evenings. And there's Nick as well. Welcome, Nick. Some familiar faces, some familiar names. Very good. Thank you, everyone. We'll get started shortly. And there is one and only Ryan Wallace.
Yo, can you hear me?
Always, man, always. Even when your microphone is off, everybody hears you.
One of the two most popular lines. You're on mute. Can you hear me?
Correct. Correct. Well, in your case, when the microphone is off, even then people can hear you. So it's different.
That's only you, Soham.
Maybe. You've not asked anybody else, have you?
That's true. That's true.
Exactly.
What's up, Nick? Can you guys hear Nick?
Yes, I can.
How about now?
And
Nick, can you try speaking? I can't hear you actually. Just go again.
Yeah, me neither.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
now
yes.
loud and clear.
All right. Look at that.
What's up, Steph?
Hey, Ryan. Hey, Soham. Hey, Nick. How's it going?
Good. It's good to have.
Pretty good.
It's good to have our own club. Feels cool.
And the best part about Clubhouse?
Okay, I think there are many good things about Clubhouse. What do you think is the best part?
I don't know. I mean, look, in a public event, you don't have to shave.
You not shave. Okay.
Right.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
I think that's going to be the high point of today's discussion. We're done.
Well, Nick is with us, so you never know.
True. Okay, guys, we should start in like a minute or so. Okay, I can see people just streaming in. So let's give it literally another minute and then let's just get in. Okay, I think we should. So, Nick, should we just get started?
Sure. Let's get going.
All right, folks. Good to have all of you here. This is one of the most commonly asked topics, and there are obviously many ways this question is asked. What should I do in a negotiation? What should you not do? But it all comes down to the same thing, right? Negotiating is a super, super critical part of the journey. It's a part of the journey which can either be a force multiplier in your interviewing process. You've done well. You've gotten to a point where you've gotten an offer or offers, and now you don't want to screw it up, right? You want to use as much leverage. Nick leads the behavioral part of the program at Interview Kickstart. Soham and I are the founders at Interview Kickstart. Steph works with us on the operations team. She's a manager on the operations team. This is, I think, going to be a fascinating discussion, guys. Just before we start today's session, like I said, we are now going to do this in the Great Careers in Tech Club. So we plan to do this every Thursday evening at 7:30 p.m. PST. Just follow the club and you'll get a sense of what are the topics. We have a bunch of interesting topics lined up over the next few weeks. Now, you guys already know Soham and I. You already know Steph from the previous sessions. So Nick, why don't you quickly introduce yourself to the folks in the room, and then let's jump in to the first set of questions that I have.
Sure, let's do it. Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm Nick Camilleri. I head up the career skills here at Interview Kickstart, and I actually see quite a few familiar faces in the clubhouse. So welcome in to all the alumni and staff members in there. My background a little bit. So I started my career working full cycle recruiting at a staffing agency called Apex, where we supported companies like Google and Apple, did all the negotiating from front to back there. Then went in-house to LinkedIn, where I sat on the hiring committees and approved the offer letters themselves for about 250 senior level engineering hires. And then from there, have done a few little startups and worked in recruiting in those as well. So I've been doing negotiations all over the board there, teaching salary negotiation amongst other things at different universities. And then I've been here at IK now for, gosh, four plus years. So that's been a wild journey. And in that process, I've been able to negotiate from the candidate side, from the coaching side, about 5,000 offers.
That's
or
insane.
5,000 offer calls. Yeah. So we've seen a lot. We've learned a lot. And it's one of my favorite topics because it makes a huge difference in the lives of the people when they have the opportunity to afford a down payment on a house for the first time, start a family for the first time. So it's a very fun topic for me, and I'm excited that we get to talk about it tonight.
And Nick, before we go any further, congratulations on the anniversary a couple of days ago.
Thank you. Much
Sitaran in the photograph seems to have stuck with you for a while. Well done.
I don't know how, but yes, there's actually a story about that photograph. Pretty wild, but perhaps we can talk about that a little bit later.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to start, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a bunch of very common mistakes and obviously discuss them, right? Now, folks, if any of you believe that there are any people who could benefit from the discussion that we're going to have, given the fact that between Soham, Nick, myself, Steph, we've probably worked with above 5,000-6,000 offers for sure, maybe much more actually. And if you think anybody's going to benefit, just ping them into the room. It's open. You can just ping anybody into the room. So let's start, Nick, Soham, with I'd say possibly the most common mistake, right? And let's talk through that, which is, given the level of excitement after having interviewed for a while, you pick the first offer, right? Somebody gets an offer and they say, hey, this sounds good. I'm just done. I've been doing this for a while. Let me just go ahead and accept this, right? Why is that a bad thing? Why should they not accept the first offer that comes their way? They've been interviewing for a while. They're now exhausted. So, Nick, anybody, just pick this up and let's explore this just to get this started.
Sure, I can get us started. So accepting the first offer that comes your way is kind of like getting married to the first person that agrees to go out on a date with you. It could be perfect, but there could be a lot more out there. So you want to do your work to really analyze it and make sure it's the right move. But there are really two mistakes that go on here, and I'm happy to jump into either one. The first mistake is assuming that the first offer at that company is the best that they can do. And then the second one is accepting an offer before you've had the opportunity to get competing offers and see what else is out there. So I can jump into either one of those there, but yeah, this is a really common one.
So talk about the second one first, Nick. Why is it so important to get competitive offers? I mean, it's fairly obvious that you can leverage companies against each other, but maybe if you could provide a little bit more detail on just how that plays out, how you've seen that play out, how you've seen people's offers move when they've used competing offers effectively.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, so we had a student back in 2019 that's coming to my head right now, named Jason, and he was a more junior guy, was fairly underpaid. He'd been working for about 2 years for a startup. Didn't have a CS degree or anything, so the first offer that came his way was an offer from Twitch, and he was super excited. I mean, for anyone who's not familiar with Twitch, it's a Amazon subsidiary, kind of the YouTube of gaming, big moneymaker. So it makes sense for him to be really excited. And he wanted to accept it right away. Now, he was getting about a 30% pay increase. So in theory, this sounds like a phenomenal opportunity. It's a career launching company. You're getting a 20-30% increase. We should take it. So we talked about this a little bit and sort of discussed, okay, are we in a situation where there's pressure here to have to accept it? Or are we only accepting it because it came through? And what we found out was he wasn't as excited about the opportunity as he would like to be, but he was thinking that it was the right career move just because it's a semi-known commodity. So we came up with this strategy of, all right, let's stall this company as long as we can, stall Twitch. And what we did is we gave him the opportunity to go out and interview more. And we figured if you're able to clear Twitch's bar with additional practice, you should be able to clear many more, right? So what ended up happening was, fast forward about 2 months, 3 months, he ended up getting competing offers from Microsoft, Salesforce, and Facebook. Now, at this point, he's thinking, well, these are even larger brands for my resume, right? And keep in mind, this guy, didn't have a CS degree. He didn't have that pedigree. He needed some brand recognition, right? And he got them into a bidding war because they were all open at the same time, right? Now, from there, he was able to get an offer from Facebook, he ended up accepting the Facebook offer, and they ended up doubling his salary. Now, again, he started low, so he had some room to grow. But if he hadn't waited, if he hadn't told Twitch, okay, I'm not going to accept this because it's my first one, he would have been leaving about $80K on the table, right? Which early in your career is massive. When you start to think about compound interest, 80,000 could be, it's huge, right? So that's kind of the danger of accepting the first one. Even though it sounds great, you should really allow yourself to get multiple opportunities and see what's the best way forward.
Okay, so one of the things you talked about, and I think this is what makes this a little bit more challenging. And so maybe you can talk to this, and then Nick, how do you keep companies waiting? Right? Because they are on their own timeline. The recruiter's looking to close quickly. When you get an offer, how do you keep them waiting?
Yeah, that's a fun one. Obviously, this is sort of very dependent on the recruiter and the company, but some things can help that we have seen. So the first question I would ask is that why do companies rush into things, right? Yes, they're looking to hire. They want to hire somebody as soon as possible and get them started and get them trained and all that. It takes time for people to come and get trained and all that. That's certainly one. But the bigger reason that companies want to just rush into this is that they are worried that you will take their offer and shop around, right? And they will be in this forever, and they will not know whether to continue to interview other people and for how long and such. So one thing that that has worked in the past is when the company tells you that they are interested, right, stop the recruiter right there and say, great, thank you, please don't give me numbers yet. Right? Again, stop the recruiter and say, thank you, right? I mean, and in some more words than that, but thank you, please don't give me numbers yet. I would like some more time to think about this without the numbers. Okay? Oftentimes, recruiters actually appreciate that, and that also gives you more time to go around, knowing fully well that the company is interested. Okay? And then you could go around more. They will obviously ask you how long, and at that point, if you say, it'll take me 2-3 weeks, that's a much more palatable thing to hear compared to hearing something like that once they have given you numbers, right? Because now you can't shop their offer around. So separating those two things out is one strategy that when you can make it works quite well. The other thing that works is reflecting on how the interview has been, right? You have 5-6 interviews with the company, and if you feel like the interview has gone super well, there is a very, very good chance that the company is going to wait, right? Like the exploding offers and the deadlines, right? More often than not, having been on the other side, I can tell you that they are almost always just not very useful. They just make it to create FOMO in your mind. FOMO is fear of missing out in your mind, and you can just be very polite about it also. Let's say you have missed this opportunity to tell them that don't give me numbers, and they gave you numbers. Sometimes it's just an email that comes and all that. If they just gave you numbers and you feel like your interview has gone very well, then realize that they will wait whatever they tell you. Right? And so just be polite and firm and say, very good, thank you, appreciate it. I enjoyed speaking with everybody else, everybody in the company, and such. However, I would need some more time to get through this, and be very upfront. We are fans of being upfront. Be very upfront. I would like to explore a couple more companies for the next 2-3 weeks, right? And then that is the other thing that often works. Now, if the interview has been on the borderline, then that's a different question. Right? But otherwise, these two things work. But Nick, I'm sure, also has some other ideas.
Yeah, no, I would just double down on everything Soham said there. Holding off on the numbers is a great idea, and being upfront with them around your timelines and keeping those as open as possible, right? Just saying, if you think you're going to need 2 more weeks to complete your interviews at the other companies, ask for a month, right? Now, they might not always give you that, but ask for more time than you think you'll need and see where they come. Now, when you go back to the other companies that you're interviewing with, you can say, hey, I need to get this done quicker. We need to expedite this. I have competing offers. And that way you can have these all open at the same time. The only thing I'll add there is, with the company that's waiting for you, as a way to keep them engaged and show them that you are interested, get a sell meeting, right? So what this sell meeting is basically ask to meet a hiring manager or somebody that could potentially be on your team, to ask them about the company culture, the projects that you're going to be working on, things like this, right? Companies love doing sell meetings because it gives them, at least in their mind, kind of an upper hand that they can get you excited so you'll accept sooner. But doing that, you can really judge, is this the right opportunity for me in my career? And you could use that information about why you're excited about those other companies as leverage in future negotiations, right? But holding off on the numbers, I think, would be the biggest core idea there.
So, guys, before we move to the next set of challenges, right? Nick, there were 2 things, right, that we talked about. One was, don't assume that the first offer that you get, even from the company, right, that has given you the offer, is the best offer. Mm-hmm. So why is that the case? Why should you not assume that the first offer is the best offer? Is there a band that you should be playing with? You should be thinking about first offer as just a way of opening the conversation. What's the thought process around that? Soham, you as well.
Yeah, band to play with is an interesting thought, but so the way I think about this is that when you're doing a job search, right, you're not going to be doing job search like 1,000 times in your life, right? Like in your 40-year career, you probably do like 8-10 times, if that. And if you are in technology, especially software engineering, you have to realize that the technology moves really fast, right? Money in tech moves extremely fast from one thing to the other. And every so often new frameworks come about and new tools in tech comes about. So one, you should interview more often, but you take the idea further that once you have interviewed and you've gotten an offer, right, it is quite likely that you just haven't explored enough yet. Right? Like, ask yourself the question: have you explored enough to say, like, now I understand what the landscape looks like? Like, I understand what the landscape of tech looks like. I understand how the companies and markets are seeing me and evaluating me, right? Even if you have explored and say, okay, now I've seen all the new companies these days, great, I got this one offer, but that still doesn't tell you how the market is going to see you. That's just one data point. One data point doesn't make a line or a trend, right? So at least get 2, right? And say, okay, yeah, this is where the market sees me. I am at X right now, and looks like with my skill set or whatever I have done at this current company for last X number of years has put me at this X plus delta band in terms of comp and in terms of tech. Right? That doesn't come by just interviewing at a few companies. That doesn't come by just getting one offer. That understanding comes by getting at least 2 offers when you see the numbers, right? So that's how I think about this.
Okay, but not everybody has the luxury of getting multiple offers, right? Mm-hmm. So Nick, what happens when somebody gets just one offer and they've tried, but they've gotten one offer? How do you negotiate in a one offer context?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Ryan. That's why we like keeping you around. It's tough questions. No, this is
Yes.
this is a tough situation, and it really goes to the fundamentals of negotiating, and what you're doing early in the process, right? So a big mistake that a lot of folks make in the negotiation is they start the negotiation only once the offer comes through, right? Why is this such a big mistake? Okay, so when you wait for the offer to come through, it's very easy for that company to defend why they feel that is the right offer, right? But if you anchor yourself high, like let's say at the beginning of the process, you say, I would expect to see somewhere between 200 to 250, right? And then they come through with an offer at say 150. Now, even if this is the only offer you have, you can put sort of FOMO into the eyes of the company themselves by saying, look, I'm talking to a few other companies right now. I'm seeing that I'm being considered in this range. I really like this company, right? I'd like to work with you guys, but we talked about 200 to 250. This is just lower than that, right? So I mean, you can play with the language here a little bit, but the idea is, if you set the proper expectation from the beginning and they don't meet it, you can hold them accountable, even if it's your only offer. If you don't anchor, there's nothing you can do really, right? So it's important to have the proper fundamentals as you move through the process.
And when you are anchoring, right, how do you figure out what to anchor at? Because you're doing it upfront, you're doing it before competing offers. That is the real challenge, right? You don't want to come across looking like a fool as well. So what's the thought process around anchoring? Do you just look at like levels FYI? You look at, internally from IK, you talk to us. How do you anchor?
Well, yeah, great question, Ryan. So this is something that we train our students on. So we're happy to help there. But the important thing here is that we understand the true market rate. Okay, there's a lot of resources out there, levels.fyi, LinkedIn Salary. Some people will go to places like Blind to do research as well. PESA is another one. Now, the important thing here is you want to identify the total market range and really get multiple data points. I would recommend at least 30 data points so you can get a true sense of what's possible. Okay, and then from there, exclude the outliers and anchor yourself on the high end, right? Even if they decide to, quote unquote, lowball you, go underneath it, as long as you're above the 50th percent mark, you're still winning, right? So you need to figure out what that kind of high end of the range would be that is still realistic. Okay. So if we have 30 seconds, I can give a quick story on this that actually just happened this week, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we had a student named Joy, right? And she was a more senior individual, data scientist, and had a conversation with Microsoft for kind of a niche role in their medical research, medical devices division. And so she was able to see, this is a senior role, a more rare position for them. It's going to be harder for them to find this individual, and the market was pricing, in the 5s to the 6s. Okay, so she did this research. She was able to identify a range roughly like 580 to 640. Okay, well, she was also interested in smaller company startups, and she was a pretty hot commodity. She had a PhD. She had worked on directly relevant products. Okay, and so because she anchored herself high at Microsoft, and she was kind of a hot commodity on the market, they decided to play the game, right? And so they gave her an offer in this range. Okay, now when that happened, another startup, which is in the space, a direct competitor, came through, and they were going to give an offer. I believe it was initially, about 400. Yeah. So they were falling short.
Nick,
Okay.
we lost you. We lost you for a second. You said there was another startup going to give an offer, and then I think you broke out for a second.
Oh, yeah. So the other offer fell short about 200 from what Microsoft was coming through at, right? But because she anchored herself high with Microsoft, okay, then this other startup goes, okay, that's a big delta. There's no way we're going to be able to make that up, but we have to try as best as we can. If it was maybe a 20K difference, they could have, made reasons for why they think she should still accept their offer. But because Microsoft played, because she anchored high, they go, this is a big delta. Now they had to make a bunch of concessions, right? Giving her remote work. They ended up giving her the highest sign-on bonus in the history of their company. Okay. And they ended up coming up some of this with stock, pre-IPO stock, but they ended up coming up about 200 because they had to. So that's only possible when you anchor high.
Which offer did she take?
She actually ended up taking the startup, which was pretty wild. There's lots of reasons for why people might take different offers. We can get into that if you guys are curious. But yeah, she ended up taking the startup.
I'm going to ask you to just hold on to that, Nick, because I think
for sure.
that's one of the mistakes that I also think people make, which is they don't think that the non-FANG companies can compete with the FANG companies, and
right.
we should pick that up maybe in a couple of minutes. But
sure.
since it is my role to ask tough questions, right? And since the person I enjoy asking the tough questions to most is Soham, to put him on the spot. So Soham, what if somebody forgets or does not anchor through the process and they realize only in the end, right? So you made the mistake of not anchoring. You realize, let's say you've spoken to Nick, you've spoken to somebody else, and now you have a oops moment. Can you anchor towards the end of the interview process? How do you recover from it? Can you recover from it at all?
Yeah, it is somewhat difficult. It is somewhat difficult when you have not anchored. Now sometimes anchoring doesn't take too long. One could try and get even if you try and get an interview call at a different company while you are towards the end of the negotiation process at the first one, even that can sometimes work as anchoring. So so if you got an interview call with Facebook, like as an example, you could just say, I have an interview call with Facebook. Even if I am with you negotiating towards the end of the process, like that is something that I would consider to say, okay, I don't want you to go to Facebook, and maybe we can up this offer. So and a lot of these things come down to the interview, how the interview has gone. If you feel like the interview has gone fairly well, you can do like quick anchoring towards the end also. That's one thing that could work.
Okay, Nick, to what you just mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that we have some examples like Steven, Devang, bunch of other folks we can talk about who've had incredible stories through this process. And one of the things that, at least when I talk to you, when I talk to our alums, I find that a lot of people are under this serious misconception that they cannot get offers from non-FANG companies that compete from FANG. I'm going to say this is like, the third really big mistake. The first one we talked about was accepting the first offer, not waiting for competing offers. Second one we talked about was not anchoring through the process. Third one, I think this is a really big one, right? Is the marketing machines of FANG is so amazing that most folks tend to believe that, hey, there is no point interviewing or getting offers from non-FANG companies because they're just not going to be able to compete. Is this true? Or are there, is interviewing at non-FANG companies a very smart strategic thing to do, even from a negotiating standpoint?
Yeah, great question. No, the direct answer is no. There are tons of companies that can beat FANG offers. I've seen at least 150 that have just beaten a FANG offer flat out.
150 different companies beating FANG offers?
Easily, yeah. I mean,
Wow.
Just off the top of my head, companies like NVIDIA, Niantic, Pinterest, Twitter, Uber, Lyft, any company that has bots in it, Dropbox, Box, Snap,
Stripe.
Stripe, yeah, Stripe, even pre-IPO companies, right? So Ryan mentioned one of these such students that's popping in my head right now. This individual ended up being our offers record holder for a hot minute with 17. And that person had 4 FANG offers, right? The highest FANG offers that they had were in the 380s. And then they had an opportunity from a company called Airtable, pre-IPO. And Airtable goes, look, this person has 15 other offers at the time. I don't want to screw around. We like this person. And they end up giving an offer in the 420s in cash, right? When I'm talking the Facebook offers and the Google offers and the Apple offers, those were stock plus bonus plus base salary. That gets into the 380s. This startup pre-IPO said, you'll still get equity, but just bonus will go into the 420s because we don't even want to screw around, right? So what can happen here, okay, is a company. So 2 things, okay. Firstly, the FANG companies may get a little bit of hubris, right, and say, yeah, we have a lot of good talent coming through the pipeline. We don't need to give you more money, right? And then you could almost use the reputation of the FANG company against other companies, sort of like Aikido, if anyone's familiar with that. You use the momentum of the enemy against them, right? So what you could do is you could just mention, I have offers from Google and Facebook and these companies. And that company, in this case, Airtable goes, if this person's getting offers from the FANG companies, they must be really good. And for our company being smaller, we need somebody that's that good. So we're just going to go all out. And so this can work quite frequently. Now, you could either use that, to Ryan's point, as leverage back against a FANG company and say, hey, 420 something, what can you do? And they might try to beat it. Or you can just say, hey, this company just beat a FANG company by 40, 50K. Let's run with it.
Awesome. So guys, I'm going to tell you another story which I remember very clearly of a candidate. This guy worked at a startup for 9 years, and he was desperately trying to move. He had failed many interviews. Eventually decided that I'm not going to interview anymore. Couple of years later, decided to interview again. And this time he decided that he wanted to come to IK because he said, I need a structured program. Anyway, the course went on. He started doing well. His dream company was Facebook, right? Now, coming into the program, his comp was 175K. While interviewing, I think 3 months into the program, he started interviewing. He did get an offer from Facebook, which was his dream company, right? And his offer at Facebook was 325K. That was the first offer that he got. Now, remember that his coming in compensation at that time was 175K. So Facebook had given him an offer at 150K. It is Facebook, his dream company, 150K increment, but the first offer. He decides to keep them on hold. And he's already interviewing. He had been speaking with Nick. So he had aligned his interviews very well. And so he asked them to hold for a short period of time. In the meantime, he gets an offer from Roku. And his Roku offer, if memory serves me right, the total offer was 425K. I think it was 375K plus 50K sign-on bonus, right? So this is an interesting story because by keeping Facebook on hold, a FANG company on hold, he got a non-FANG company to give him an offer that was 150K more for the first year and about 50, 60K more there on year. And he got them to compete, right? So I love this example because it doubles down and don't take the first offer. It doubles down the fact that you should get people to compete, and it doubles down on the fact that a non-FANG company very often can pay you incredibly well, and in this case, much more, right? Okay, I see it's halfway. Guys, I'm going to quickly refresh the room for those of you who have joined. Soham and I run this room. We do this once a week. At the same time, the idea is to talk about all things oriented towards careers in tech. We do this for our alums at Interview Kickstart and for anybody else who's interested. Today's discussion is with Nick, who leads the career coaching part of the program that we offer at Interview Kickstart, and it is possibly the topic that we get the most questions on, which is what should you not do when you are negotiating at top companies. We've talked about 3 key things already. Number 1, never accept the first offer. Number 2, try and get companies to compete. Get yourself into a position where they are fighting for you. Don't assume that only the FANG companies can pay you. Get non-FANG companies to compete as well. And try and set your expectations early on in the process. Anchor up so that you can get good offers, right? We will be taking questions very soon, guys, but there are a few more things that we want to kind of rummage through, right? Just to explore and give you a sense of how not to screw up the interview process, the negotiation process, I beg your pardon. Okay, now, Soham, to you. Should I be keeping, yeah, I was right. Should I be keeping the recruiter informed of my interviewing across companies? Does that help me negotiate? What can I keep them informed about? What should I absolutely not keep them informed about? You know, if I get rejects from companies, should I be telling them? Should I be not? Should I be telling them I'm actively interviewing? What is kosher?
This is one of those things where you just avoid the extremes. Obviously, there's no need to tell them all the rejects that you have had, right? Just tell them the accepts you have had. And if you keep the recruiter informed about every interview that you get, that also becomes overwhelming. Try and think about what this company is, right? Which company's recruiter you're talking to, and that company and that recruiter cares about which other companies, right? So there is a league, right? There's an invisible league, invisible tier that these companies fall into. And if you don't talk about companies in the same tier, they don't usually care, you know. And so like if you are at Google doesn't care about an offer from a random company, right? So they would care about an offer from, say, Databricks. They know that internally, they know Databricks is giving solid offers these days. They would care about an offer from Facebook, for example. So talk about those companies, right? Keep that in mind. And again, it's very difficult to really find exactly what it is, which companies they care about. But at least in the case of tier 1 companies, you can make intelligent guesses. So like Box does care about Dropbox. I can tell you that, and vice versa. So their close competitors in the same tier is the easiest starting guess. And you should try and get interviews at those places. And even simply mentioning like, hey, I have an interview. I might have an upcoming interview at this X place. Right, that also helps, right? Build your case and build FOMO. Right? The way companies are trying to build FOMO into you, you have to build FOMO into them, right? And that's really the key, into this process.
So Facebook, Snap, Twitter, companies like this, which are in the same domain. Nick, what are the things that you should absolutely avoid telling recruiters through your interview process?
If you get rejected.
We've seen a few people. It sounds funny, but we've seen a few people go and mention things like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the big one. But I mean, it's important to note that recruiters are on your side, right? They're not intentionally trying to lowball you or anything like this. They succeed when you succeed, right? And they succeed when all their other candidates succeed as well. So understand that if you tell them, for example, your current salary, or say, hey, just give me the market rate, or you know, give me what's fair, right? If you tell them, give me whatever's in the band, okay, they'll do whatever it takes to close you and their other candidates. And if that means their other candidates have leverage, have a higher offer, and you're saying, I'm okay with anything, right? Or this is my current salary, I just want, you know, a little bit of an increment, okay, they'll do that, right? So I think someone put it well to say, don't go to extremes, but don't tell them where you've been rejected. Don't tell them your current salary if you do your research and you realize you're under market. Don't tell them, you know, where you are in the process with other companies. It's fine, like someone said, you know, I'm talking to other companies, but I would just leave it vague. Okay, think of it kind of like poker or a game of cards. You want to hold those cards to your chest a little bit, and say, yeah, no, I'm talking to Facebook and or whatever other company. It's exploratory right now, right? So that you create that question, and never get into a position where they're saying, okay, well, have you gotten the offer from Facebook? Yes or no? What is the offer from Facebook, right? You want to leave that vague until you have the data first.
So Nick, that's actually a tricky thing, right? Because so I know in California, for example, you cannot ask your previous compensation, right? So nobody can ask you what you're currently making. That's not true in other parts. So
that's correct, yeah.
and very often recruiters will try and push you into telling them what you're currently getting. How do you sidestep that? That's like a time bomb.
Yeah, totally. So it's important again to know what the market rates are, and then you can put the onus on other companies a little bit here. So you can be direct with them, upfront with them, and just say, you know, I'm not comfortable sharing my current salary, right? But I'm talking to a few other companies, and this is what I'm being considered for. Now, why this works, okay? It's important to first understand why the recruiter asks this question in the first place. They're asking this question because they want to submit you at a number that they know will work for both parties. If you tell them that you know, I want to make 150, okay, but the highest side of the band that they can possibly go to is 130, then they're going to say, boss, I'm sorry, we can't afford you. Maybe you can come back in a year or so, get a little bit more experience. Maybe we'll consider you for a more senior role. We can get to 150 for that, but we don't think you're ready yet. Okay, and that's fair for everybody. But as long as you give them your any number, and it's realistic, they can submit you. Okay, so they're not trying to ask for the number to lowball you. You don't have to give them your compensation. Just say, you know, right now I'm not comfortable with my current compensation. I am talking to a few other companies, and this is what I'm being told. So that would be my expectation. That's what I would want to see.
Okay, guys, I don't know whether you caught this. Nick mentioned something quite interesting just now. Very often when we talk to folks, they think that it's a fight, right? That it's a fight, you on one side, the hiring manager and the recruiter on the other side, right? So it is not like that. It is not like you're either with me or you're against me. They want you to get hired, right? They want to try and come to an offer that is compelling. So in many ways, you guys are both optimizing for the same thing, right? To try and get you hired at that company. So, you know, just remember through the interview process that it is not a with me or against me construct, right? You're all fighting for the same goal. Okay, guys, before I get to the next couple of things that we want to explore, folks, if anybody has questions, right, you want to discuss your case or you have any questions on the strategy that we've talked about, anything that you are needling through, thinking about in terms of offer negotiations, just start raising your hand, guys, right? Because we will start taking questions very soon, and it's a lot of fun to actually help people address their own circumstances. Everybody benefits from that as well. Okay, now, Nick and Soham, I am, as both of you know, a fan of the long game, right? We've talked about a whole bunch of negotiating strategies, things to avoid, mistakes to avoid when you are pretty much at the last mile, right? Or or last few miles. Now, truth of the matter is that that is in effect short-term negotiating strategy, right? But one can actually look at the long arc of your career as one big negotiation and a way to constantly keep moving up in your career. So that's what I want to focus on now, right? Thinking about negotiating actually across companies, across time, and across roles. So, Soham, you first, right?
Uh-oh.
Is there is there value in actually planning your career in terms of multiple steps, right? So, for example, maybe you cannot get into a FANG company right now. You come off a startup, and there are awesome other companies, right? You know, FANG is not the only set of awesome companies, like Nick mentioned. 150 other companies have beaten FANG, but there might be a set of companies even below that, right? Maybe a career starter companies, things like that. So, what should be the thought process that I, as an engineer, should have to optimize my career from a, let's say, compensation perspective over a long period of time? Is there even any value in thinking like that across horizons?
Yeah, no, I mean, partly a rhetoric question, but it certainly is. I think not to mean that money is everything, but money is absolutely something, right? And so the idea, general advice that we usually give to people is that you should get into a well-paying company as early as possible in your career. So if it is internship, be it internship, if it is first job out of college, first job, not the first, then the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, like whenever it is, get into a good one. Now, and sometimes it is not possible to do that, right? So for various reasons, it may not be possible to just get a role at a tier one company just when you want it. In that case, just think of sort of the companies as sort of a stepping stone, right? Get into another one, which is a stepping stone into the first one. So then that's entirely fine. I mean, that pushes out that thing by a couple of years, but that's okay. That's okay. Eventually you land there, and then after that, if you feel like, boss, this is not for me, for a variety of reasons, it's possible that it's not for you. That's okay. Right? You could take a step down, so to speak, in the hierarchy as well. But very likely what's going to happen is that you will that just spending even a short amount of time at a tier one place will open up many doors for you. And then you can go back to another tier and sort of stay there for a longer period of time. So one should optimize for that, certainly, in that
Now,
fashion.
Nick, I know, and we'll start taking questions because we've got a lot of questions, great questions that have come to us on YouTube as well. Before we start taking questions, Nick, I know you also feel very strongly about thinking of your career as one big negotiation, right, over a long period of time. Just talk a bit about that. What are your thoughts about that? And then let's go and take questions.
Yeah. So my philosophy around this is, in order to get to more niche and more senior roles, you have to make great contribution in the positions prior. Okay. So a big part of this is analyzing the opportunity irrespective of money. And do you believe that you will be able to grow and contribute in a massive way? Okay. So as an example, when I was deciding on Interview Kickstart, right? And Soham may remember this at the time. We had one cubicle in the office, one classroom. And I had opportunities from a few other startups, and I was talking to recruiters at Facebook and Uber and a few others. And a big part of what I was looking for was a manager that would challenge me to think deeper, that would give me the flexibility to make mistakes and to continue to grow and kind of follow a vision and own things, right?
And you still joined Interview Kickstart, given that Soham was that manager.
It was a shot in the dark, but yes.
Okay.
But no.
I'm not so sure.
Damn, it hurts.
I'm not so sure.
It's a short.
But you know what? But what happened here, right? Was I came into the office to discuss with someone the idea of a careers program, right? And it was supposed to be like a 30-minute meeting, and it ended up going for about 2 hours. right? Maybe even longer than this. We did a lot of whiteboarding. And I started to realize that this was a guy that culturally would allow me to grow, would ask me the hard questions, would if you don't see a manager that's going to challenge you in the ways that will allow you to grow, that won't value, the same things that you do, right? For example, if you value work-life balance and they don't, you're probably not going to last very long at that company, long enough to make major contributions that will make you a hotter commodity for the next role, right? If you find somebody that does value work-life balance and you work in all hours of the night, they're going to say, "Hey, you're ruining our culture," right? And they're not going to want to promote you because it's corrosive. So I look at this through the perspective, just to wrap up my point here, of our top offers leader of 2021, right? This individual took a similar perspective in his previous role, right? And he joined Lyft because of the manager, okay? He thought they saw eye to eye. Lyft was a rocket ship. He thought, I'm not going to make as much money now, but I'm going to do well in this company. And so because of that, he saw a few promotions over about 4 years. He got a lot of stock refreshers, pre-IPO refreshers. And then they went public. And now his baseline was very high because he had grown in the company, right? When he went to go interview for Facebook, they now had to compete with his salary, which was in the 600s, okay? So he ended up getting an offer from Facebook at 780 with a sign-on bonus over 800 because he had grown significantly at Lyft. And because as part of that growth, he had gotten refreshers that brought his whole baseline up. So finding the right manager, finding the right projects, making a considerable contribution makes you a hotter commodity for the next role, even if it's not the highest paying role right at that moment. Does that make sense?
Yep. Awesome, Nick. We're going to go and take questions. Guys, amazing points covered. I would say the first question that I'm going to pose actually is from somebody who's reached out on YouTube because it's kind of linked with what Nick mentioned just now. Soham or Nick, anybody, right? Feel free to take this. The question is specifically vis-a-vis startups, right? So how do I negotiate with a startup where they can only match the base pay, right? But I'm going to lose some amount in terms of bonus, RSU, and ESPPs, right? So let's look at this in terms of a broader question. Is there a difference in a strategy that you use to negotiate with startups, given that they may not be able to match exactly the kind of offers that you're getting at the top companies? In many cases, the startups are obviously very early or they're not public, so it's very difficult to put a value to the ESOPs or the RSUs that you might get, and so it's difficult to compete. So, in a startup environment, what can you do?
Yeah, so I suppose this is slightly a different topic, I'm guessing, but startup is a loaded word these days, right? Some people think Lyft is a startup, for example, but no, that's
Right.
not the case, right? And there are startups which are like fairly big now, right? These days there are many reasons startups don't go public for a long time, and there are big startups, and so I'm going to ignore those startups for now. Right? Databricks, for example, big startups, and so I'm going to talk about startups which are relatively small, and when you are joining them, when you're getting some sort of an offer from them, you have hesitation on like what's going to happen with them, right? Because the others are fairly clear. I mean, the larger startups, we can just treat their liquid, their equity as liquid, but the smaller ones, see, the thing is, you should not, generally nobody should be joining a startup, right? Like that's sort of the default state. The only reason to join a startup is if you really connect with the problem that they are solving and or the team, right? That you saw. It's a bunch of friends, or you are, or some people you highly respect are in that company, and or they are solving a solid problem that you really connect with. Right? That's really the only reason to join a startup. At that point, your negotiation topics are not about, oh, I have this offer from Google which is like 500K and you are just giving me this which is not. like that's not the point. Then you're really not fit to be a part of a startup. um, these days, there is absolutely no reason to join a startup if you're just looking at comp. If you're looking at comp, then just join either these large startups or join public companies, right? There's really no excuse otherwise. The reason to join a startup is just to is if you really connect with the problem, and at some point you hope that your contribution, right, will be fruitful. So I think the question, this question should generally not arise as such. If you have joined the startups for the right reason. Now, yes, there are some times when that's the only choice you have, where that's the only offer you have, or those are the only kinds of companies that you are getting attention from, and you have a couple of those, and for some funky reasons, the bigger ones you're not getting into. In that case, really there is not much to even negotiate, right? You just sort of accept the better one of the one you have and just move on with it. So I hope that helps a little bit.
All right, cool. Bhargav, you're up here. Did you have a question?
Sure. Thanks, Soham, Ryan, Nick, for organizing this for like several weeks. I'm really enjoying. So
Thank you
for that. Yeah.
Thank
My
you.
question is like little bit. I'm not sure like if it fits in the agenda, but it's like related to negotiations. So I will just put it up there. I have joined this like the pre-IPO EV company, and then I had like the competing offer, but then they did like all what they could. But here is the interesting thing that happened. So I'm just like putting up the numbers there. Let's say they, depending on my competing offer, they gave me the RSUs of 200K. Now, because this like pre-IPO company is very near to going to IPO, they are giving the RSUs, not the options. They are giving me like 200K RSUs, saying me like their current price is like $15. But what happens in the pre-IPO, like company, they're like they have the board meeting every end of the quarter. So because I joined in like the February, my RSU price will be decided in April, right? So they mentioned that it's currently 15, but maximum it can go to 25. But now when I joined this startup, I see their price is already like 37 because they got like large funding of 2 billion. So they were saying like 25, but it's already 37, and that is the price that I'm going to get equity at. So my equity is like reduced by like around like 30% due to that. So how can I negotiate like in that case, because I already joined the company now?
That's a good question. Tricky question. Soham, any thoughts on this?
No, it's certainly tricky. So the key there is to bring it up the correct way with your manager or manager's manager, like a director or someone, and or the HR. This is what has happened, right? And when I joined, this happened. When I joined, that happened. So like properly, like with clear numbers and not with entitlement, but like clearly, just tell them that I still love this company, but like this is what has happened. Now, at the same time, you have to realize that if it's a company that got that much funding and it's actually on a growth trajectory, it's quite likely that that differential is going to get wiped out as the company grows from there, right? As well. So, don't overly worry about it. It is a privilege to be a part of a growing company, right? Like I can't emphasize this enough. Many people, right, live their entire careers not being part of a growing company even once, right? For it. So
Makes sense.
yeah. And Iran, you are probably have a perspective as well, having seen hundreds of these.
Yeah, no, I think that if you are on a rocket ship, try to get the best out of it, but don't over engineer it.
Yeah,
like if
just
you're already in a
any
rocket
seat
ship,
on the rocket ship is fine as long as it's a rocket ship.
Yeah, it's
that's
as
what
long
they
as
said.
exactly as long as the rocket ship, you're good. And to tie this in with what Nick was saying, you got to look at your career over a longer arc. And I think that is a mistake that many people make. They focus excessively, and not to pick on a category, but this is overtly true about engineers, right? Many
Especially
people,
engineers in the valley. Yeah.
yes. They take a very they shop around all the time, right? And they're constantly trying to locally optimize. You're on a rocket ship. I think it's a good question. I think it's a bit unfortunate, the situation, right? But try and
Right.
explain the
I was like
situation.
bit upset because like
Yeah, so you
when
should
I
talk to them. I don't
when
think you have
I
any.
got offer, their price was just 15, but they mentioned that it can go up to like max 25, but like 15 to 37.5 is like like less than half, right? When I look at it,
Totally.
so it was like
Yeah.
kind of like,
No, so
if
you were,
even if it goes to like 1 million, it could have been gone to like more than 2 million. It's just like that.
so
Yeah.
yeah, but so two things, Bhargav. One is 1 million is better than zero, right? And it's
Yeah.
certainly not as it's certainly not as good as 2 million, but 1 million is still 1 million, and that is something to be grateful for. However, you have a genuine case, right?
Right.
And so you should feel free to go and talk to HR and say,
Exactly.
guys, this is what's happened. Can you guys do anything about it? Obviously, a lot of it depends on how you've been performing at the company and what position they're at. But it is a very genuine case, and you can absolutely go ahead and ask the question. You should, right? You should absolutely ask the question. And again, think long term, because if you ask the question and you have a genuine case here, and they say no, we can't do anything, you have
Yeah.
basically now gotten some leverage for yourself, right?
Right.
Because the next time you want to talk to them, you can say, guys,
Exactly.
you know
Exactly.
what, you
Yeah.
you weren't able to help me the first time around, I understand, but now I'm continuing to do well. Do something for me now, and it's important to build that leverage.
Right.
Okay. Good,
Yep.
great question. Great
Thank you so
question,
much.
Bhargav.
Thanks.
No,
Grateful to be a part of this. Yeah. Thank you.
good. I'm glad. Keep coming. Let me now go with Vinod, and then I think there are many more questions on YouTube, so we'll keep interspersing. Vinod, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going? So
Good.
I had this question in my mind. Like, so when I was in the job market getting offers, like especially I got offer from Microsoft and Facebook. So I was put in a situation where my base pay was like pretty constant, and they kept on adding for the sign-on bonus and in RSUs, but I couldn't like negotiate for a bump in my base pay. So is there a strategy or a way to get rise more rise in base pay than in stocks or in sign-on bonus? Because I feel getting more in base pay is gonna pay me more in the long run.
Nick, you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So just to clarify the question, you're saying that uh, uh, you want to influence them to get more base than stock or equity. Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's so it's a great question. There's two things that I want to highlight here. One is just the argument for base versus equity, period. There's a great saying that we have around here, which is base salary will pay your bills, right? Bonuses will get you toys and vacations, like maybe a new car or something like this. Equity or stock sets you up for retirement, right?
Right.
So there is a lot of value in that stock or equity at a growing company will grow faster than money in the bank, right? So I just want to put that counter argument there just to think about.
Okay.
Now the other thing though, if the way I would think about negotiating is really what is the total compensation, not to break it down space by space, because that gives the recruiters and the budgeting committees more flexibility on how they can get you that money, especially if it's a publicly traded company where that stock is liquid and you could sell it as soon as it vests, right? It's all cash. Now, if you are in a situation where, for example, you're joining a startup and you have some immediate financial goals, right? You want to start having kids or get a house or something like this, that's fine. But I would be very specific before you enter the negotiation about thinking, how much cash do I need to accomplish my goals, right? So if I want to buy a house and I need 160, over the next year to put a down payment down, okay, then I need to know that's the target I'm looking for. And when I negotiate, you can tell them, okay, well, so this is what I need to get to in terms of my base, right? Stock is fine, or I could be flexible elsewhere, but I need this in my base to get my baseline expenses. So that's how I would do that. But if we just say, give me more base, less stock, or whatever, you start to play a dangerous game where they can say, well, that's the most we can give, right? And that's not productive.
Right.
So Vinod,
Yeah.
I just want to add two things very quickly. One is, the point that Nick made, I think is very useful for everybody to understand. Remember, these guys they want you to join, right? And so if you can give them more flexibility in terms of how they can create that offer for you, you're in a much better position, because then you have stuff that you can discuss, right?
Right.
Instead of putting hard numbers, guys, I only want this and nothing else, right? The second thing with stock, this is a this is a message that I try to tell everybody that I can when they're thinking about stock versus cash. You know, if you think of the top companies, in effect, when they're giving you stock, so let's take Facebook, right? If Facebook is giving you stock, literally what you are doing is you are hiring Mark Zuckerberg to be your money manager, right? That is really what you're doing,
Right.
because he's managing your money, right? When you're doing
That's a
it
great point.
at any of the other if you're doing it at Amazon, well, you did have Jeff Bezos, right? Now you have the new guy, Andy, I can't remember his second name, the AWS guy.
Yeah.
And if you think about it like that, right, you have the smartest people in the world managing your money. And that is the reason why equity is actually very, very important. But good, very good question. I'm going to actually before I take Naveen, Rajat, and Shashi, your question, guys. There are a couple of very interesting questions that have again come on YouTube, right? So, Soham or Nick, either of you, this is an interesting question, right? Akshata has asked this question. If you have an offer for X amount from company A, but the offer has expired by the time, so maybe Som, you take this when in terms of exploring offers. So let's say offer from company A, but the offer expired by the time you get an offer from company B. Can you still use the offer from company A to negotiate?
Yes, you always can. The simple fact that you have had an offer at a higher number, which I'm guessing is the case here as well, is clear data point that the market values you higher than what this company is valuing. So you must feel free to tell them, certainly, that hey, I've had an offer like that in the past, and this is it. Look, they gave me more than what you're offering, right? And so this tells the recruiter that even if that offer is not yet active, right, this person can go ahead and get these kinds of offers, right? So the recruiter doesn't want you to leave after you join the company, right? It's just it's a loss on every side. So they will for the most part they will consider it. Like nearly everybody will consider it, and I think Nick might have a perspective here too.
Yeah, so no, I would just double down on what Soham said there. I think that's pretty well put.
So, Akshata, the idea of a negotiation, right, which is why I don't like the word negotiation, because negotiation is typically assumed as a win-lose, right? Somebody has to win at the extent of somebody else. The truth of the matter is win-win is the best outcome here, right? What is a negotiation? It is essentially a way of finding a fair price for your services. If you were to think of yourself as a businessman or a businesswoman, right? What you are saying is, I have something to sell, which is my time, my intellectual horsepower, and my capability. You want to buy that from me. Now let's agree on a fair price. And so any information that helps you get to fair price discovery, in this case, an offer from somebody else, because that is true price discovery. Somebody has said, I am willing to pay this for you, for your skill sets. Anything that helps you get to better price discovery is going to yield to a better negotiation. Don't negotiate in bad faith, though. Don't make up stuff. Don't talk about, don't inflate numbers very significantly, right? Be smart about what you do. Look at bands that are out there. There's a lot of data. So as long as you're negotiating in good faith, right, and you're working towards honest price discovery, all information that helps get honest price discovery is fair game, right? So you should absolutely be willing to share that. Rajat,
Good point,
Nick,
Ryan.
sorry, you were saying something?
No, yeah, sorry. You just reminded me of something there as well. When you get offers, get proof of the offer, right? Sometimes they won't give you the offer letter, but you can still get an email, like send them an email and say, hey, I'm just discussing this with my family. These are the numbers we're discussing, correct? Right? And if they say yes, you can have this. Now, assuming this offer didn't expire too long ago, you can still use that as price discovery, right? To say, see, this is proof. They're willing to give me this much if they want to hold you to it. when you try to lie or make up a story, they will ask you for proof, right? If you say, oh yes, Facebook's going to give me an offer at 400, they're going to say, okay, can you give me proof? And if you don't have proof at all, you've lost virtually any leverage that you would have had, because now they feel that you're trying to pull a fast one, and you've lost that trust.
Okay, cool. So we got Rajat, Shashi, Naveen, and Pratik here. Guys, Rajat, bear with me a second. One of the questions that came on YouTube from Venkatesh was, how do I negotiate if I have only one offer in hand? Sorry, this is from MUKSNY111. So I think we already covered that. We won't go into that in detail, right? Effectively, try and figure out price discovery by using data that is out there on levels.fi. Talk to us, try and figure out what the band is, anchor early some of the things that we've covered. We will obviously be putting this up in the form of a blog, guys, in the next few days, and we will be doing that for all the previous rooms as well. So if you go to the Interview Kickstart blog, you'll be able to read all about that. I think we've covered most of the other questions. Rajat, did you have a question?
Yeah. I have like a two-part question. So
Sure.
just few minutes back, Nick mentioned that we should not be revealing our current salary to the recruiter. But then the question is the recruiter will ask like, what's your current profile or title? So let's say if I say I'm a senior engineer at company XYZ, then they can pretty much like the data that I have from levels.fi or whatever. I am sure recruiters have much more comprehensive data about all the companies in Bay Area or like the software industry. So they can easily gauge the salary that I might be getting. So is there a way to hide, like, is it okay to hide the title or not reveal to them? And then the second part question is like, if let's say I was under leveled while getting hired in my current job, and if I anchor my expectations to the L+1 level, having said that L and L+1 are like the roles and responsibilities are pretty much in similar nature, right? So if I anchor at a higher level, will the can I target for that level? Will the recruiter set me up for the interviews and everything for the L+1 level?
It's a good question. I can jump in, Ryan.
No, it's a very good question.
Yeah. So there's really two questions here. One is, how should I determine my level, right? And then the other one is how does level influence the rate, essentially? Yeah.
Right.
So the first thing to note here when we're thinking about how do we set our leveling, understand that every company levels differently, right? And simply having a title or being at a level does not mean that you'll be considered at that same level in the future at the next company, right?
Right.
So when you're in your discovery call, your recruiter phone screen, they're going to try to understand your past experience to determine, to the best of their knowledge, where your experience tracks in their company. Now, they may keep you at the same level. They may down level you. They may up level you, but generally that only happens if you're going to a smaller company, right? Now, when you're having that discussion, okay, you should be prepared to have your expectation data for your own level, L+1, L-1, okay?
Okay.
Now, assuming they keep you at your same level, okay, then you can tell them your expectations based on what that equivalent level will be, right? So you can ask them, so I'm just curious, are you considering me at the senior level or the software engineering level?
Senior level.
Right. So this is what you would ask the recruiter. They say senior level, you say great. So these are my expectations, right? So you're still setting your expectations based on what they would make a senior. Makes sense. If they consider you at a software engineer, you can still ask for the senior one. But to track yourself and say I'm going to go for L+1, they might say that's out of the question because they view you as L-1 based on your prior experience. Does that make sense?
Yep, got it.
Cool. Yeah, great question.
The other quick thing to add there, Nick, is that this is exactly why one should join larger companies. I mean, they have a lot of these shit figured out. Right? This is like they have rubrics on what level, what number of years. They know how to read resumes. Like, not saying they're perfect, but better than many other smaller companies who just can't invest in some of these things, right? Like, for example, Google has a compensation committee, right, which predicts compensation based on the counter offers you get, right, or based on other offers you get. If you have offer from this X company, they will evaluate what is the future of that company, right, according to their models, and then understand what the compensation is. And so some of those things just get ironed out. The other thing you have to also note is that for the most part, right, recruiters don't know too much, right? Like, they know a lot about their company and what their rubrics are, what their bands are, right? That part of the equation binds them a lot more than your offers, right? So don't assume that the recruiters will know what the salaries are at this band everywhere in the market and all that. No, often that doesn't happen. I mean, it depends a lot on who the recruiter is, if they are trained, the junior, senior, what kind of support they have behind the scenes, and such. And so it's possible that the larger companies recruiters do, but the
Yes, yeah,
smaller
that's what I
ones
was
will
going to
not.
say.
Yeah.
The larger companies might know a little bit more than the smaller companies. So, guys, there's another interesting point to be made here, which is, so made the point of saying go and interview at a larger company because that's a great way to have price discovery. I want to actually go in with a different view. This is also the reason why fundamentally working with people, right? We, for example, at Interview Kickstart, or anybody, right, who has done this a lot and who's done this in the past, is well worth your while. Just knowing how to negotiate effectively can drive an increase in comp in sometimes, like Nick mentioned, of 80, 100K, right? 25, 30K is like table stakes, sometimes much more than that. So think about the fact that you might not be an expert at negotiating. And so try and get yourself to work with folks or get help from folks who have been doing this and who are experts at negotiating, because let me assure you, it will be absolutely well worth your while planning well in advance, knowing how something as simple as just knowing how to line up your interviews and get all your offers at the same time, managing that process, that in itself is worth its weight in gold, right? And will give you far, far, far more yield in terms of return than what you're going to actually invest. So don't try and take this on yourself, right? Get people to help. Rajat, I'm going to move you back to the audience. Soham, I have a hard stop in a few minutes because I have a call coming up. Now, there is Shashi, Naveen, and Pratik who are here. Should I stop hand raising and just take the questions that are up here, or you guys are game to go on for a little bit more?
I think it's we have already overshot by 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's stop hand raising, and when we are
Okay.
going to, and obviously we are all reachable. Our email addresses are on the profiles as well. If you can be of help, don't hesitate. Yeah, anybody.
Yeah. So Steph, can you just okay, I can do it. I've closed. I've switched off hand raising. Shashi, what's up? You're fairly regular, I've noticed.
Yeah, hi
We
guys.
have
Thanks for taking my question and putting on another great show.
no worries, man. What's the question? How can we help?
So the question is, right now I'm in the middle of negotiations with a pre-IPO startup, and how do I figure out what's a fair equity offer? So let's say this is a VP level role at a pre-IPO startup, valued at current market valuation maybe $2 billion.
Nice. Okay, Soham.
Okay.
Since you have been at an IPO startup that was $2 billion, around pretty much that, right?
I suppose.
Started.
Well, when I joined,
when you were leaving, yes,
people were yes. But anyway, so Shashi, you have to realize that there are no rules around here, right? Like at these levels, at like starting with just even manager, senior manager, and above, there are really no rules around here, right? Like there are just understood norms, right? Randomly understood norms. How much equity is fair is in that particular case is a function of how many other offers you have, like largely just that, right? At that point, smaller startups don't even have like bands and say, okay, you are the midpoint of the band or the lower end or the higher end, right? Like, they just want you, and they want you to be happy coming here and just get your full mind share into this, and then the leverage that you have is just the other offers, right? Otherwise you don't have much of a leverage as such. The the other thing to also note with companies which such as the one that you are interviewing for, the pre-IPO company, such you you can also negotiate other things, right? Like sometimes you can negotiate things like early exercising, right? 83B election, right?
Okay.
That is something you can negotiate. There are also some other sort of random things which don't apply to individual contributors and even to lower rank managers and such, like for example Cobra payments, right? That can also be negotiated, and to say if you happen to leave, right, between now and you get the next role, that the company will pay for your health insurance, right? And so some of those things companies can be can be open to. I have also heard companies are open to it's called deferred compensation, right? So it is like pre-tax contribution to a compensation, right? And so in your retirement account and such, like the limits of the 18,000, 19,000 that apply to other people often don't apply at some of those roles, and there are ways out of that as well. So sometimes at companies like yours, it helps to engage a negotiation coach, right, for executives. I mean, at IK we don't do that, but there are other coaches. They know some of these things around, right? So that's one way of doing it, and otherwise just other offers, right, for it. Now I can give you a simple thing, and I think Ryan can potentially weigh in on this as well. That a VP engineering at a startup generally say 1% equity is generally good, right? But obviously it depends on sort of when you join. So this is I'm talking about relatively early,
Right.
for it.
Yeah, no. So I think in his case, Swam, this doesn't really work
Yeah.
because he's the company is already at close to 2 billion,
Yeah, so you
right?
wouldn't get
In
1%,
terms of
but yeah, some dollar
yeah,
value you will get. Yeah.
no, but what you know that is an interesting way to think, Shashi. Just to give you a ballpark of how to think. See, if you were to use that 1% rule, it's
Right.
complex, but it's an interesting paradigm, right? What you do is you should say, okay, assuming I came at Series A, I would have gotten 1%. Okay. Now there is X amount of dilution over a period of time. So there are, people have raised at different rounds, and you can try and figure out from these guys what were they valued at when you might find it on Crunchbase, right? What were they valued at Series A? What are they
Right.
valued now? And now you know the dilution. So let's say if the company was valued, at 10 million, now it's at 2 billion. You can figure out how many rounds. Typically, assume each round the dilution would be in the first few rounds it would be about 20%. Later on, it might be 15% and less. You'll get some sort of a rubric. Okay, that will help you think about where you should be. The other way to think about this is to invert the problem. So think about the cash, right? Most of the offers that you see at these levels, it's 50-50. So half is cash, half is equity. So if you can figure out what is the relevant cash number that I should be getting, then one can assume that the equity number in terms of value should about match that number.
I see.
So you can solve the problem backwards, which is often much easier to solve than actually trying to solve the problem forwards. Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's a great suggestion. So you're saying an equity offer that within the ballpark of matching the cash.
It should match. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard to figure out, what the fully diluted
exactly
company is, and so
very
I don't know what
exactly
the percentage they would be offering. So it's very
correct. Which is why I think solving it backwards in this case is actually much easier than solving it forwards.
Note also that companies have the same problem, right? Like they don't know, right? Like they're not hiring 15 VPs of engineering at that level, right? So they also have the same problem. Now, but companies solve it differently. Some of them subscribe to services which actually aggregate all this data. There are services called like Equilar. Equilar is one of the biggest names in this. EQUILAR. They aggregate it for companies. So if you can get a hold of that data, obviously that will give you pretty good ballpark. Though often what will happen, Shashi, is that if you get a hold of that data with hundreds of companies, it'll probably confuse you
It
more than
confuse you.
Right.
Yeah.
exactly.
But the other point that someone mentioned, Shashi, is damn important. And this is for everybody else in the room as well. Your negotiation is not, it is not just about equity and cash. There is much more to be gained from a negotiation, right? Cobra payments, like Soham talked about. There are many other things. In some companies, it is like leave, remote, right? Can I work remotely? What is the flexibility around that? So try and think of it very holistically instead of a unidimensional, way of just cash versus equity. This is for everybody. But great question, Shashi. I think very, very good question to us, allowed us to explore this. Do you have anything else, Shashi, or can we move to the next guy?
I think, is it okay if I drop you a note in case I need something?
Sure, absolutely. Email IDs are simple, right? It's our name at interviewkickstart.com.
Yep.
So
Sure.
Soham at Interview Kickstart, Brian at Interview Kickstart, Nick at Interview Kickstart, Stephanie at Interview Kickstart. Okay?
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
All right, cheers. Hey, no worries. Soham, I am actually going to drop off because I've got a meeting starting right now. Will you wrap this up? And guys, next week, same time, okay? Next week, same time, do subscribe to the club. That is the easiest way to learn what are the conversations that we are going to be having. Our goal is to try and do many more of these. We want to try and increase the frequency as well to try and help as many people as we can. With that, guys, thank you all. I am going to drop off, but I'm going to leave you in the able hands of my co-founder, partner in crime, and Nick.
Uh-oh.
So have fun, guys. I'll see you guys next week. Soham, Nick, over to you. Thanks, Steph.
Thanks, Ryan.
Ryan.
Later.
Thanks. Awesome. Naveen, do you want to go?
Hey, Sam, thank you for
course.
bringing me over. So I have two questions. Actually, one is a follow-up question. Let's say you are preparing for on-site and for company X and Y, and now the recruiter Z comes in and he asks, okay, we're interested in your profile, and you mentioned that you are also going for on-site for X and Y, and the last recruiter actually speeds up the process so that you can move fast with the phone interview and with the on-site. But in the end, you decide not to take this offer. So will that better the relationship with the recruiter for future opportunities?
Yeah, great question. I mean, so it's important to note that recruiting is kind of like cricket or softball or baseball, one of these kinds of sports where, even at the most competitive companies, the best recruiters will only close somewhere between 25 to 40% of their candidates. Okay. So candidates will reject them all the time. If I'm giving you an offer, you're probably able to clear the bar elsewhere as well. And people make career decisions for many different reasons. They have their own priorities, right? And so I'm used to the fact that I can extend an offer to somebody and they might decide to take another offer somewhere else. Now, that does not deter me as a recruiter, okay? Because I know that this is a normal part of the process, I want to keep a good relationship with you. And many times, I'll get you 6 months later or a year later, right? And you'll see this with recruiters when you turn down an offer. They'll come back to you, and we've seen this with our alumni all the time. Hey, how's it going? Are you enjoying it there? Would you like to come here? We have an opportunity for you. We already know that you passed the process. You're going to be good enough. Okay. We'll still be interested in you. The important thing to take away from this, though, is to be polite about it and let them know that you still want to keep the conversation alive, right? Just let them know, I really appreciate what you've done in terms of speeding up this process. Unfortunately, right now, I have another offer that's just too good to pass up. You don't have to get into specifics or have a comparison of why they're a better offer or anything like that. But just say, let's keep in touch. I can see myself working here in the future. But right now, I can't pass up on this offer. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. The other second question is like before the interview stage. Let's say I have a hard deadline in the month of May, and I will be away from studying for a month. So that brings my momentum to very low. Should I actually do my on-sites before I take that break, even though I don't have any experience or any tier 2 or tier 3 offers yet, and uh, final interviews with tier 1, should I go with that, or should I take that hit in momentum and restart the process?
So to clarify, the purpose of that break, you said to study. Are you saying to prepare for interviews, or are you saying just to
No,
study for school?
for other family reason event.
Okay. So there's a lot of nuances here, and this is something that we do a lot of these conversations in our office hours in the program, where if this was one of our coaching calls, I'd want to dig a lot deeper into your situation and understand what that family thing is, and is it a kid where we're gonna the next 6 months is probably gonna be pretty wild and not much sleep, a lot of change, or is this like a family vacation that you can come back to it? So my answer would be really dependent on your situation, but for the purposes of the day, I would say if you feel ready right now, move quickly. Right? I mean, if you've already validated that you're ready, make the transition and then just let them know, hey, I have this event coming up, so I'm going to have to push my start date back. Right? If you have any reservation, you're not feeling confident, then don't rush. Because while you're trying to beat your timeline, trying to get there before your break, if you fail, you're going to have to wait 6 months or a year. So I'd rather say, okay, I have this break point coming up in a month. Let's build my foundation, get started, and continue prepping throughout that whole kind of break time and beyond, and then come back when I'm feeling confident. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Good questions.
Thank you.
Awesome. Last question, Prateek. Do you want to go?
Hey, Som. Thank you so much for taking up the question. This is a great session. I learned a lot of new things.
Thank you.
So my question is based on salary negotiation. Like discuss the salary negotiation based on the location. So like nowadays, lots of companies are offering remote jobs, and I had a recent experience with a couple of companies. So like Nick said earlier in our conversation that we should set up our expectation with the recruiter early in the process. So I did the same, and fortunately recruiter was like upfront with me, like since you are in local area, we cannot get this offer. And then I did a little research but could not find more information on the expected salary band or salary range in that area. So what should we do in that case? And the second question is like, can we really do salary negotiation based on the location difference?
Yeah, Nick, want to take it? I think this is a fairly common
Sure.
one as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question with that as well. Now, the second piece, when you say, can we do an offer negotiation based on the location? Are you saying that I have offers in, say, the Bay Area as well as another area, right? Or are you saying I currently live in one area and I would like to go live in another one? Or the third option, I'm living in this area, want to stay in this area, but I'm working remotely.
So I would go with the third option, like I'm living in a local area, I would like to work, but like recruiter said me, they are open with, if I want to relocate, they are open with it.
Cool. So one thing that I think is a bit of a misnomer is that salary is not fully based on location, right? It's not cost of living, it's cost of labor, right? Which means based on what other people are making for that same role in that area, I have to compete with that, or else I won't get other people at that rate. Do you see what I'm saying? So for example, if you're a software engineer in the Bay Area and everyone else is paying, let's say 200, if I'm only willing to pay 180, it's going to be very difficult for me to close candidates, right? But at the same time, I might go to let's say Denver, right? And there might be a lot of software engineers in that area that are working for 160. So me offering somebody there 180, whether they are staying in staying in Denver and working remotely, or if they're coming to me, may be more plausible, right? But that being said, I would set your expectations first based on what you're seeing is the band in that area, the local area where the company stands. Okay. Understand that if you're working remotely in an area that is known to have a lower cost of labor, they will push back. Okay. But if you're relocating there, you want to be compensated based on where you're going to be relocating to. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So Nick, what happened with me is like I was offered a full-time remote job, and the first offer was definitely a low ball, but I could bring in a competitive offer and got it raised. But when I so I'm living in North Carolina, and I was, since I could not find enough information of the salary in North Carolina, I was just comparing it with the New York, and the recruiter was like, we cannot reach that bar because the location is different. And
Right.
I was like confused, like should I accept this offer or should I like negotiate more?
Right. So if you're interviewing for a role in North Carolina, you should be looking at what's the cost of labor in North Carolina. And if you can't find information for that company in particular in North Carolina, look for other similar companies. And what I mean by similar is someone mentioned earlier this kind of invisible band, right? So think about, okay, is this a publicly traded consumer facing internet based product, right? If the answer is yes, are there other publicly traded, globally scaled, consumer-facing, internet-based products that reside in North Carolina as well, have offices in North Carolina? What are they paying people? It'll likely be similar, right? Where this breaks down is if I'm comparing, say, Google in North Carolina to a company of 3,000 people. That's not going to be the same. Right? Google's going to be paying more. But look for companies that are in that invisible band together in that location. And that should give you an idea of what you can make in that area. Cool.
Good. Thank you, Nick.
Yep.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Join us again next Thursday evening for some other very interesting topic. And also don't forget to follow the club, Great Careers in Tech. Thank you, Steph, for hosting this. Thank you, Nick, for all the answers. Very thoughtful, very insightful. And thank you everybody for your questions and listening. See you again next Thursday.
Appreciate y'all. Have a good night.
Good night.